When you've worked hard on your Godot engine game, you want to give the gamers the best opening possible. And one of the first things that they're going to see is the logo to your game's company, and you want it to look good. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you a texture masking technique that allows you to use one texture to create a reveal for another one that is the logo. We're going to see an animated motion graphic reveal to create a great looking logo screen. Now, my name is Alan Thorn. I'm from BeIndie.Biz. I'm a games developer with 20 years experience, and I want to help you make great games using the Godot engine. In this tutorial, we're going to see how we can take two textures. One is your logo, and one is a separate masking texture. And that's going to be used to hide and show other areas of the logo texture, and we can animate that over time to create a motion graphic reveal. It's really great stuff, it's dead simple to set up, and you don't even need to write a single line of code. It's really easy, let me show you how, so let's get started. So I've jumped over here into the Godot editor, and what you have in front of you is a sneak peek of what we're going to be achieving. This is the completed scene here, so this is where we're going to end up. When I press play on the toolbar to this scene, you'll see we get this big logo reveal. We have initially this logo and it's not visible, but it expands into view. Let me just run that again for you. So press play on the toolbar and we get a big logo reveal here as we're using texture masking. Let's take a look at how we make this from scratch. So I'm going to create a completely new scene by choosing scene, new scene, and then I'm going to select 2D to create an empty 2D scene. Now, I should warn you in advance that I've already specified the dimensions of this project. You can see what they are by choosing project settings, and then over here in project settings, I'm going to scroll down to the window section. Selecting window, you can see the dimensions are 1280 by 720. So I'm going to close that back up. Now, the first thing that I want to do here actually, in fact, I'm just going to close this 2D scene because I want my root node actually to be a UI node. So I'm going to choose File, New Scene, and then choose User Interface to create a User Interface node, and the control node is at the top here. That's great. Now, I want to make sure that my anchors for these endpoints are at the corners, and you can see we've got these 4 dots, green dots at each corner to indicate that each of these corners are latched onto the screen edges, and that's exactly what I want to see. This will make sure that if the window is resized, then each of the edges of this control are going to magnetize to that edge of the window as it resizes. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a background layer. So I'm going to select the control node, right click and choose Add Node, and I'm going to be adding a texture rect node. That's this node here. I'm going to choose Create to add that to the scene. This is going to display the background, which is going to be the gradient here. Now this image, this gradient image, is teeny tiny, and believe me, it is teeny tiny. It is 1 pixel wide and 2 pixels tall, and that is it. The topmost pixel is white and the bottom pixel is black. That's a really neat trick for creating gradients. It's going to blur between the two. So I'm going to load this into the texture rect by moving to the inspector, going to the texture section, clicking in the drop down, and then simply choosing load. And I'm going to find my background gradient texture and load that into view by choosing open. Now you can kind of see, but it really is tiny. So I'm going to grab the expand section. I'm going to make sure that is enabled here. And for the stretch mode, I'm going to make sure that's set to scale to allow me to scale to any dimension that I want. So now I can click and drag on that and it will scale literally to absolutely any dimension here. Now I'm going to scale it effectively to the limits of the screen. We don't have snapping enabled, so I'm going to grab snapping and just move that to the edges here by activating snap from the top to here so that this is the dimensions of the screen. Now one thing I do need to be careful of directly with this texture rect is, unlike its parent, which has its anchors set at its corners. You can see here that the not the same is not true for this object. It has its anchors set here. So I can click and drag to begin to reposition these to the corners like so. And I'm pretty happy with that, but I can check them out here on these settings. The anchors, the left and the top, should both be set to 0, and the right and the bottom should be set to 1 here. That's great. So now I have set up the properties for the background. Let's give the background a color. To do that, I'm going to expand the visibility here and move down to the modulate field. Inside the modulate color swatch, I can pick any color I want, and it's going to multiply that with the background. So I think I'm going to choose a kind of desaturated purple. A desaturated purple, something kind of like this, to give a background to our scene. We can easily come back and tweak it later when we can see it alongside the logo. Now let's add the logo. Well, actually, before we add the logo, let's grab the text direct and be just a little bit organized in our naming convention. I'm going to right click and choose rename, and I'm going to rename this to background and press enter on the keyboard. Now next I'm going to make sure I select the background node, and I want to lock it so that I can't change and move it around. I'm also going to do the same thing to the root control node and lock that too, so that I can't accidentally click inside the view and drag things about. I don't know about you, but I do that really easily, and I want to stop doing that, so I'm just going to lock those objects. In addition to this, I want to add the logo itself. That's this object here. Now again, I'm going to right click on the control and choose add child node, and I'm going to add that as a text direct. So I'm going to select text direct and choose create to add that to the scene. In the texture fields, I'm going to click on the drop down, choose load, and then I'm going to choose my logo to add that. Now there are some properties on this that I do want to change, so I'm going to make sure I choose expand, and for the stretch mode, I'm going to change that to keep centered, so that as I begin to change the value for this text direct, it doesn't matter how large I make it, the logo is always going to be centered at the center of this text direct. So that's pretty nice, which means that if we change the size of the window, if we make the window larger, we make the window smaller, this text direct is always going to show the logo dead at the center of the screen. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that I magnetize the edges of the text direct to the window. So again, I want to activate snapping just to make sure I measure these up exactly here. I'm going to move to my anchor and margin fields just to check these out. So the right and the bottom should be set to 1 here. And actually they're not set to 1. Or actually this is now scaled it because I've set them to 1. So I'm going to just scale these back into place. Let's just check that here. Make sure that's correct at the edges. Perfect. So I'm going to deactivate the snapping to bring that back here. Now the logo is in place and it's looking pretty good. I'm going to also lock the logo, and I'm going to rename this to logo. And that's looking pretty good too. I'm also going to save the scene. Notice the scene hasn't been saved at all, and I want to keep my progress, right? So I'm going to choose Command S to save the scene. Go to the scenes folder, and I'm simply going to call this logo start. I don't want to call this logo completed. I want to call it logo start. Choose save, and there we have it. The scene is saved. Now our scene displays a logo, but there is no logo unveiling yet. And that's what I want to work on now. So to create a logo unveiling, I'm going to be using this circle mask. This effectively represents the region in which I'm going to hide and show this logo. To do that, I'm going to click on the control, the root object, choose add child node, and I'm going to add a Light2D node. So I'm going to add a Light2D to the scene, which I can drag around, and right now it doesn't really do anything at all. going to select the light node and move to the inspector. And for the texture field, I'm going to click on the drop down and choose load. And then I'm going to select my circular texture. Now, when I do this, as I expand it, you can begin to see that it interacts with and blends with whatever textures are beneath, including the logo, which is really, really bright, and the background itself. Now, we're going to be changing that shortly because I want this mask to affect the logo, but not to affect the background. So I can change that by selecting the background object and under the light mask field here, where it's currently bolded in, I can click on that to remove it so that now the light doesn't affect the background, but it does still affect the logo. That's great. It's not having the effect I want, of course, because it's brightening the logo, and even the logo outside can still be seen. I'm going to move to the light mode and change that from add to mix. Now, when I do that, we can't really see anything that's going on here. It really isn't working as we would intend, but we're going to change that in just a second. So I'm going to grab this light and position it to the center. Now, I know the dimensions of this window, so I can grab the transform field here and I can type for the X field 640 and then for the Y 360, which is half the vertical height and width of the window. So next I'm going to go over to the logo section, and for the logo section I'm going to move down to the material field, the canvas item material field, and expand that. For the material section I'm going to click on the drop down and choose new canvas item material and then expand that outwards. I want to change the light mode from normal to light only. Perfect. Now let's take a look what happens when I move the light. So I'm going to grab the light, move it around, and now you can see it's masking out the relevant areas of the logo. Pretty amazing stuff. I'm going to undo that to recenter it, because really we want this unveiling to happen as a result of an animation. So I'm going to save the scene. Now the next thing that we want to do is to create an animation that's going to change the light at the center of the scene from being teeny tiny, where we can't see the logo at all, to enlarging, revealing the rest of the logo. Let's see how to do that. So I'm going to go back to the control panel here, and I'm going to right click and choose add child node, and then I'm going to choose animation player, which is this node here, and choose create to put that back into the hierarchy here. So we have animation player, and this allows us to create animations. You can already see at the bottom here, it's created this animation window. So I'm going to click in the animation field and choose new. I'm going to call this anim logo reveal and choose OK. Now I'm going to set the logo to be about 2 seconds in length. So I'm going to go to the timer field and choose 2, which is pretty good. I don't want the animation to repeat, so I'm going to make sure that's not activated. But I do want the animation to play when the scene begins. So I'm going to move to this autoplay section and activate that. You can tell it's activated because the autoplay icon appears to the left of the animation name. Now in the add track field, I need to choose what I want to animate. And in this case, it's going to be the size of the light here. So I'm going to grab the add track field and choose property track because I'm going to be animating a property of the light. Property track, I'm going to select Light2D, going to choose OK. And then I've got a whole range of settings that I can choose from in here, but I want to choose scale. That's the setting I'm going to be changing. Set the scale, choose open to get that scale property track. Now I'm going to create a keyframe at the beginning here just by moving my cursor to the beginning, right clicking, and then choose insert key to add a key here. Left click on that key. The initial value and scale of the light should be not be 2.6 blah 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 blah, but it should actually be 0 0. So it should be at 0. Now nothing initially appears to change, but as I begin to move my slider in the animation field, it does go to 0. Now I'm going to move to 2, which is the end of the animation, and right click and choose insert key, and then left click on the key to change its value in here. Now I don't know what the maximum value should be. Let's start by setting it to 8 and let's see what happens. So at 8, you can see here that as I move along, it gets to about the right size here, at this point in the animation. And at this point, it's already at the right size. So I'm going to change this perhaps to 5. And let's see what happens at 5. 5 is not quite right. So I'm going to change it to 6. And I think 6 is the right number here. 6 is my magic number. So that's looking pretty good. We change here from 0 to 6 as we progress through the animation. That's great. I'm going to now save my code, save my entire scene with Control S or Command S to save that. And then I'm going to choose play on the toolbar. And there you have it. Our logo bursts into view. Now, of course, that took a time of 2 seconds exactly. I can change and select my animation player, and in the playback options, I can change the speed. If I want it to be twice as fast, for example, I can set it to a value of 2, in which case the animation is going to happen in half the time. I could make it even faster if I wanted to, for example, to 6, press play, and we have a really fast reveal. But I'm going to set this perhaps to a value of 3, and then choose play on the toolbar to set that up. And there we have a complete animation logo reveal using texture masks right here inside the Godot engine. As you can see, it really takes almost no time at all to set up a texture mask reveal right here inside the Godot engine, and they're capable of really impressive results to create motion graphic effects for logo screens and other kinds of cinematics for your game. It's dead simple, so make Light2Ds your friend. Thank you for joining me on this tutorial. It's been a real delight having you here. I've been Alan Thorn, part of BeIndie.Biz. Please do subscribe to our channels and be sure to join me for more tutorials as we explore the wonderful world of Godot. So see you next time.